Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson, and I am your host. In this episode, we are going to be going over my Week 5 starts of the week for the 2024 fantasy football season. We're also going to be recapping that crazy Thursday night football game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. And then we're going to do a bit of a Dynasty trade review as well, mainly focused around Bears wide receiver DJ Moore and Bills running back James Cook. Before we get into any of that, though, please make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast. And if you are listening somewhere where you can turn on notifications, make sure you do that as well, so you stay up to date on the newest episodes and become a fantasy football prodigy. And if you do want video for the podcast, you can head over to the Fantasy Football Prodigy YouTube channel, and you can see my lovely face on the camera, as well as SpongeBob back there, and a bunch of other random stuff. But I'm recording this on October 4th, 2024, Friday night. By the time the video podcast gets updated, it might technically be Saturday, October 5th, but the audio podcast should be up tonight on the 4th. So I only say that just so if news breaks or anything happens after this recording, you can adjust accordingly. And yeah, we're on our 21st episode, 21. So this is pretty dope. We're going to start with my starts of the week for week 5. And we're just going to go position by position. And we're going to start with quarterback. We're going to kick it off with Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers versus the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals defense gives up the 6th most points per game to the quarterback position, and they give up the 4th most points per game on the field in general in the NFL. This game has a 50-point over-under, which is the highest of the week. The 49ers offense should score a lot in this game. Brock Purdy is always a good play in the right matchup in this productive offense. He has Brandon Ayuk, who hasn't quite lived up to the Brandon Ayuk standard that we've come to know, but he is still a talented player, and hopefully he shakes off the rust and shows up and has a good game. But he has Brandon Ayuk. Deebo Samuel is coming back from injury, and even wide receiver Jawan Jennings has stepped up as a playmaker when there are people off the field missing with injuries, or even when they're available. Jennings has been making plays this year, and superstar tight end George Kittle is questionable, so if he plays, that obviously helps. But I do like Brock Purdy either way as a top 5 quarterback play in week 5 against the Arizona Cardinals. Start of the week, Brock Purdy, put him in the lineup. My next quarterback start of the week, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers on the road against the LA Rams. The Rams give up the 7th most points per game to quarterbacks, and they give up the 2nd most points per game on the field in the entire NFL, just points on the scoreboard. This game has a 48.5 point over-under, which is the 3rd highest of the week. Jordan Love has a great connection with wide receiver Jayden Reed, and Christian Watson at wide receiver is going to miss this game, but Dontayvion Wicks stepped up last week when Christian Watson got hurt, and Wicks made some really big plays in this game. And Dontayvion Wicks was already a guy that people thought highly of at wide receiver, sort of one of those sleeper potential breakout candidates. It's just kind of a crowded depth chart, but with no Christian Watson, Dontayvion Wicks should be able to step up and make some plays for Jordan Love. Jordan Love did have a slow start last week. He was coming off of that 2-week absence with an injury that he suffered in week 1. The Packers ended up trailing my Minnesota Vikings, and they needed to throw a ton. And he actually ended up finishing the week as the quarterback 2 overall with over 30 points in fantasy. This is a great matchup. Jordan Love is a great player who's now another week removed from that injury. He has great weapons around him, even with Christian Watson out with that injury. Jordan Love is a top 6 quarterback play in week 5. We're going to move on to the running back position. I'm going to start with Jordan Mason of the San Francisco 49ers at home against the Arizona Cardinals. Week 5 start of the week. Arizona gives up the 5th most points per game to running backs, and they give up the 4th most points per game on the field in the NFL. This game has a 50-point over-under, highest of the week. Jordan Mason is the running back 5 on the season, filling in for Christian McCaffrey. Like I said, I like Brock Purdy and the passing game a lot this week, but I think both the passing and the running game can succeed in this matchup on this great offense. Jordan Mason at this point is an every week auto start, but I wanted to bring him up here because I particularly love him this week as a high-end must start running back one. So no matter what, I don't care who you have on your roster, Jordan Mason needs to be in your lineup because you're going to regret having him on the bench unless he leaves early with an injury. That's the only way he doesn't have at least a good game here. Like, it's pretty much a lock. Now that I said that, he's probably going to do terrible, but is this the Isaac Guerendo game? I don't know. You know, I dropped Jordan Mason in Dynasty and I kept Guerendo, so I wouldn't mind it. And I have Christian McCaffrey, so I wouldn't mind Guerendo making some noise. But anyways, moving on. My next running back start of the week is Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers at Chicago. Week 5 running back start of the week. I loved Chuba Hubbard coming into the season as a 0 running back target with Jonathan Brooks, the rookie, being drafted early to be the guy, but coming off of that ACL injury, wasn't going to be ready to start the year. I thought Chuba would get off to a hot start, sort of like he finished the 2023 season really, really great. But weeks 1 and 2 were really rough for Chuba Hubbard and this offense in general with Bryce Young under center. But this offense has been much, much better in weeks 3 and 4 with Andy Dalton taking over at quarterback. This has translated to increased production for Chuba. He was the running back 41 overall in weeks 1 and 2. But over the span of weeks 3 and 4, since Andy Dalton has taken over at quarterback, Chuba Hubbard has been the running back 3 overall in all of fantasy football. The Chicago Bears have a good defense, but what they really shut down is that passing game, and they do give up some production in the running game. They allow the 10th most points per game to the running back position, making Chuba Hubbard a high running back 2 play in week 5. Those are my running back starts of the week. We're going to move on to the wide receiver position. I have quite a few more I have quite a few more wide receiver starts of the week than quarterback or running back. There were just more wide receiver plays that really stuck out to me. So before we get into that, before we buckle in and we go over some week-winning wide receiver plays, remember to follow or subscribe wherever you are watching so that you can become a fantasy football prodigy. We want to win some leagues here, all right? All right, let's move on to the wide receiver position. So I said I like Jordan Love, and I like his receiving options. Wide receiver starts of the week, Jayden Reed and Dontayvion Wicks of the Green Bay Packers on the road against the LA Rams. I love Jordan Love in this matchup, no pun intended, and I think the passing game is going to have a ton of success in this matchup. Jordan Love has to throw it to someone. These are his top 2 options. The Rams give up the 8th most points per game to wide receivers, and they give up the 2nd most points per game on the field in the NFL, just on the scoreboard. This game has a 48.5 point over-under, which is the 3rd highest of the week, like I said earlier when highlighting Jordan Love. Let's start with Jayden Reed. In 2 games with Jordan Love at quarterback, Jayden Reed has been phenomenal. Week 1, he was the wide receiver 1 overall with 31.1 points. In week 4, with Jordan Love coming back from injury, he was the wide receiver 2 overall with 23.6 points. He's been a top 2 overall play every week with Jordan Love. That's the headline right there. Obviously, that's not going to happen every single week, but this is a great matchup. Reed is a great player who makes plays, and he is a mid wide receiver 1 play in week 5 against the Rams. Fellow wide receiver Dontayvion Wicks is also a really great play in this matchup. Wide receiver Christian Watson left early last week with an injury, and Wicks took advantage. He saw 13 targets, only caught 5 of them, but it turned into 78 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he finished as the wide receiver 3 overall on the week. There were some drops and missed connections in there, and he was that close to having an even bigger day for fantasy. Christian Watson will miss this game, meaning that Wicks will have another opportunity to step up as the wide receiver 2 in this offense. He was already a guy to keep an eye on, someone that people were monitoring as a sleeper candidate, and we saw him take advantage of his opportunity, and now he gets a great matchup to fill in as a wide receiver 2 yet again. I like Dontayvion Wicks as a really solid wide receiver to play in fantasy in week 5. And now that I said all this, this is the game where Romeo Doubs pops off. But if I had to play any of these guys, it would go Jayden Reed, Dontayvion Wicks, and then Romeo Doubs after that. Next wide receiver start of the week. We're going to go with Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jags at home versus the Indianapolis Colts. This game has a 46-point over-under, and the rookie, Brian Thomas Jr., is the wide receiver 15 on the season in the entire NFL. I know, might be surprising. He has flashed really elite talent at times, and this is an example of a young player in his first year that is trending up. Even in a struggling offense, to be a top 15 wide receiver is very impressive. This Colts matchup is one that can be exposed for fantasy, especially if tight end Evan Ingram is out again for this game. He's questionable as of this recording, but if tight end Evan Ingram is out again, Christian Kirk at wide receiver is also a really solid play, but he is more of a safe PPR option, whereas Brian Thomas Jr. has a real upside to make some big plays in this game. Brian Thomas Jr., low wide receiver 2 play with a lot of upside for the Jacksonville Jags in week 5. My next wide receiver start of the week, we're going to go with Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns at the Washington Commanders, wide receiver start of the week for week 5. This game has a 43.5-point over-under, so not super exciting, but Washington gives up the second most points per game to the wide receiver position. They have a bad defense, and they have a good offense. The Commanders, that is. The Commanders have a bad defense, but they have a good offense. The Browns' defense is very tough, but if Washington can keep this hot streak going and put points on the board, Cleveland will have to throw a little bit in this game, which would help Amari Cooper even more. But even if it's like a neutral game script, nothing too exciting, Amari Cooper is still a really solid play here. Amari Cooper has definitely been disappointing for fantasy, but a lot of that at the start of the year was drops and missed connections from Deshaun Watson. And last week he had an 82-yard touchdown wiped off the board on a bogus holding penalty that should never have been called and didn't affect the play. The targets are still there. I don't think Amari Cooper is a player who's going to keep dropping the ball. And honestly, I just think the luck factor should even out at some point with Amari Cooper. And this is a great spot for him to turn things around and have a really great game. Amari Cooper is a mid wide receiver 2 play in this game, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had one of his big blow-up performances this week. Amari Cooper should be in your lineup. If you're between a few players, Amari Cooper should be in there over someone who doesn't offer as much upside, because Amari Cooper every year, he has those really big week-winning performances. So you don't want that to be on the bench. The box scores haven't been great, but all wide receivers are inconsistent. And at least with Amari Cooper, you can very clearly look and see why some of that production has been lacking. So if a couple things break the right way, he would be having a great year. And we don't want those little mistakes or bad luck get in the way of a big performance here for Amari Cooper. My next wide receiver start of the week is contingent on who is at quarterback, who is under center. So we're going to talk about Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts on the road against the Jacksonville Jags. Michael Pittman is a week 5 start of the week only if Joseph Flacco starts at quarterback over Anthony Richardson. Okay, so as of this recording, Anthony Richardson is questionable. Right now, Joe Flacco is a better thrower of the football, and he is just more able to get the ball to his weapons. Anthony Richardson left the game early last week against Pittsburgh, a tough defense, and in 80% of the snaps, Joe Flacco fed Michael Pittman, as well as Josh Downs, who recently returned. Downs had a really good game as well, but we're focusing on Pittman here. He had his best game of the season, 9 targets, 6 receptions, 113 yards. I just don't know if Michael Pittman can surpass 100 yards with Anthony Richardson under center. Just his play style, his throw accuracy, the types of throws he makes, just the total number of passing yards and completions to go around. Joe Flacco is a much better archetype of quarterback for what Michael Pittman does on the field. Jacksonville gives up the 6th most points per game to wide receiver, and this game has a 46-point over-under. Michael Pittman is a great wide receiver to play this week if Joe Flacco gets the start, but you're going to have to downgrade him if Anthony Richardson is able to suit up. So Pittman is only a start of the week for me if Flacco is under center. We're going to move on to the tight end position. I got 2 tight end starts of the week for you. We're going to start with my guy, my tight end, my guy for 2024, Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys, on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Tight end start of the week for week 5. This game has a 44-point over-under. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense is tough, so this spot doesn't jump off the page as an exploitable matchup, but Jake Ferguson is the tight end 5 on the year in average points per game. We're using that metric because remember, he missed week 2 after getting injured in week 1. And on top of that, wide receiver Brandon Cooks is out for this game with an infection. So there's more targets to go around to other weapons. Like I said, this spot isn't necessarily one that seems great on paper, but just given how bad the tight end landscape has been so far in 2024, Jake Ferguson is a top 5 tight end play in week 5. The only other guys that I would be starting over Jake Ferguson are Travis Kelce with the Rashee Rice injury, George Kittle against the Cardinals if he's active, and then stud tight end Trey McBride, who might just be the best tight end to have in fantasy. Those are the only guys that I would for sure be starting over Jake Ferguson. After that, if you want to start Ferguson over everyone else, I would not blame you. Jake Ferguson, tight end start of the week for week 5 against the Steelers. And then my final tight end start of the week, we're going to go with Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers on the road against the LA Rams. Great start of the week for week 5. This Rams defense is really beat up, and they give up the 2nd most points per game on the scoreboard in the NFL. And they're a good matchup for tight ends. This game has a 48.5-point over-under, which is the 3rd highest of the week. Tucker Kraft is the clear starting tight end over Luke Musgrave. And last week, with Jordan Love coming back from injury, Kraft saw 9 targets, which turned into 6 receptions for 53 yards and 1 touchdown. He was the tight end 2 overall on the week. In this tight end landscape, that production last week is enough for me to make him a mid to low tight end 1 in week 5. And he has some upside here with no Christian Watson in this game. And if he's able to get in the end zone, and this is just a good offense in general. So I love Tucker Kraft as a tight end start if you don't have a locked in option, which you probably don't, given what we know about tight ends this week. I guess we can do a quick little segment on defenses as well. I don't have like any formal notes on it, but I can just kind of give you my thoughts off the dome here, just looking through kind of the top defenses of the week. So if you're streaming the position, the Denver Broncos are a great play. They've been a really solid defense this year. They're at home against the Raiders, who are going to be without Devontae Adams yet again. Gardner Minshew at quarterback. I think there's some sacks to be had, some mistakes to be made. It's a good matchup. They're at home, and the defense is playing really well. So they're one of the top overall defensive plays, if not the number 1 defensive play this week. After that, honestly, I think the Broncos are pretty far and away my favorite play of the week, because after that, you got the Bears at home. They get the Carolina Panthers, but with Andy Dalton under center, that offense has been better. I still think it's a good play. It would be much better with Bryce Young under center, obviously, but the Bears are solid. The Seahawks at home versus the Giants with no Malik Neighbors. Obviously, Daniel Jones is very prone to turnovers. He's thrown his fair share of pick sixes, and on the road in Seattle without his top wide receiver weapon, who the offense runs through. That's probably my 2nd favorite play at tight end, or at defense, not tight end. There's no good plays at tight end other than Jake Ferguson and Tucker Kraft. After that, you got the Patriots at home against the Miami Dolphins. Remember, they're on their 3rd string quarterback, who they brought in off the street, Tyler Huntley. He has another week of preparation, so it could be better than last week. But in New England, offense that is broken without Tua. Patriots are a solid play. After that, there's no one that I really, really like. those are the main guys I want to focus on. Some defenses that have been traditionally good and are probably rostered, like the 49ers, they're at home versus the Cardinals. I mean, that's an okay play, but the Cardinals are a good offense. They've been underperforming a little bit, but there's not a ton of good options this week other than those top four. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings in London against the Jets. They didn't look good against Denver last week, and the Vikings defense has looked amazing. It's going to be in London, so sometimes there's some weird things that happen. In that same game, the Jets are a pretty high-ranked defense, but the Vikings offense has been great. At that point, you're kind of just banking on Sam Darnold regressing to the Sam Darnold that he's been his whole career and maybe throwing some turnovers. Yeah, it's pretty rough for defenses this week. You know, the Patriots offense isn't great, so you could also play the Dolphins defense on the road in New England, but I don't really love that. I don't know if there's going to be a ton of turnover opportunities. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson is probably due for a fumble. Brissett could throw a pick. Yeah, it's rough. I guess the last one would be like the Rams offense with those injuries. You could maybe play the Packers, but they're on the road. So, yeah, it's ugly. So Broncos, Seahawks are definitely the top. And then you got like Bears, Patriots, and then after that, there's a big tier break. So that's enough of the defenses, I think. We are going to go over the Thursday night football game between the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Atlanta Falcons. This game was in Atlanta, and it ended up being a crazy, crazy game. Very high scoring. The Atlanta Falcons were able to get the overtime victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 36-30. Both teams are 3-2. First game of week 5 was a good one. Those Thursday night games can be pretty rough, but that was a good one. We'll start with the Falcons side, just because they won the game. So Kirk Cousins, this is a real stat line. 42 of 58 for 509 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. He had going into overtime, he was already at 400 something yards, but he threw a game-winning touchdown pass to Hodge in the overtime period that put him over 500 and got him that 4th touchdown. He's probably going to be the tight end, or why do I keep saying tight end? I just really want tight ends to be relevant, but he's probably going to be the quarterback one on the week unless someone has a crazy performance. Probably one of my starts of the week. Probably Jordan Love. Probably Brock Purdy. But yeah, he looked incredible. Yeah, it was a really, really great game for Kirk Cousins. I mean, obviously there was some panic after week 1 with him not lighting it up, but it's it makes sense. Week 1 against the Steelers, coming off the Achilles injury, new team, I always kind of felt like it was a bit of an overreaction. Like, oh no, the Falcons offense is going to be terrible. Obviously there was so much hype around them. There was questions if they would live up to that top tier level, but in this game, they were clicking. The Bucks defense could not stop them. And then in the rushing game, we'll start with Bijan Robinson. He was 12 for 61 on the ground. He saw 3 targets, caught him off for 16 yards. A little bit disappointing. He hasn't quite had those big blow-up games that we hoped. And there's just a lot of weapons on this offense, and Bijan might not give you those big blow-up weeks very often, especially with Tyler Algier involved. He saw 6 carries for only 12 yards. He also saw 3 targets, caught him off for 13 yards. But Bijan Robinson is an each and every week auto start, but there's other guys on this team that can make plays. One of those guys is Drake London. He saw 13 targets, caught 12 of them for 154 yards and a touchdown. This is the Drake London that the offseason hype was kind of hoping for. I traded for him in Dynasty only because I got a really good deal. I was kind of out on Drake London at his ADP when he was at his peak hype. But, in that league, I'm in a win now mode, and we'll talk about that later in the Dynasty trade review. And I was thinking about maybe flipping Drake London and to a rebuilding team for more of a win now player who can get me points today, like maybe AJ Brown, who is a better player, better for fantasy, but older, or maybe a running back that doesn't have as long of a shelf life as this young receiver, but can help me win a title this year. But after this performance and seeing how this offense has it's been getting better and better, I think Drake London might just be a hold, because he could give us it depends. Obviously, this game was an outlier with the scoring. Kirk Cousins is not going to throw for 500 yards every week. I'm a Vikings fan, so I can attest to that. I'm not trying to hate on Kirk, but no one's doing that. But yeah, if Drake London can keep up like getting this type of target share and doing a lot with them, and if Kirk Cousins can actually like continue to look good at quarterback, he might just be something special in this offense. And then he was actually out targeted by Darnell Mooney, who saw 16 targets, 9 receptions, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He had a really bad drop in the fourth quarter that was very crucial. They could have maybe won the game outright in regulation had he caught that. He might have even broken a tackle and gotten into the end zone if he caught it. So could have been an even bigger day for Darnell Mooney. I know in one league if you guys are familiar with the fantasy footballers Megala Bowl, I am in that, and I was deciding between Zach Moss and Darnell Mooney. And I went with Moss. Even in a tough matchup, I thought he was the play, but Darnell Mooney, I did not expect to see 16 targets. Luckily, I did play Darnell Mooney in my Guillotine League, and that performance out of a player that's kind of lower on the totem pole should secure my, me going on into the next week. Like, it's hard to be the last place scoring team with Darnell Mooney going off for 102, but he had a great game. And then Kyle Pitts, we had a Kyle Pitts sighting here, guys. I once upon a time traded George Kittle and a first-round pick away to get Kyle Pitts, and that has definitely been disappointing. But the Kyle Pitts truthers, they got a dub here. 8 targets, which is really great. We want to see him utilized, okay? He had some broken plays early throughout the season, but this is the type of utilization that we want. 8 targets, caught 7 of them for 88 yards. Look, we'll take that, man. I mean, this is a guy who had 1,000 yards in his rookie season. He should have the talent. He was one of the most hyped up prospects ever. This is what we need from him. So I want to see it again before I'm really bought in, but it's good to see that he at least has this in the chamber. And then Kaderil Hodge, for what it's worth, he caught the game-winning touchdown. He was 2 for 67 and a touchdown, 45-yard touchdown walk-off win. It was crazy. He's not super relevant for fantasy. If there was any kind of tertiary target that was relevant to like deeper leagues, that would be Ray McLeod, who's had some games this year. He's been involved. He saw 9 targets in this one, went 6 for 66. And yeah, so those are kind of the main Atlanta Falcons. For the Bucks, Baker Mayfield had a really great week 2, or as well, week 5, not 2. 19 of 24, 180 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was 6 for 42 on the ground as well. So Baker Mayfield is kind of entering that territory where we should maybe be considering him quite a bit over some other options. Like, it's not necessarily I'm going to auto play Mahomes over Baker Mayfield, because Mahomes just hasn't been good for fantasy in a while, and Baker's been great, especially in the right matchup. Like, I don't think anyone predicted this matchup to go bonkers like it did, but he had a really good week. And then in terms of rushing, Rachaad White was 10 for 72. 3 targets, caught him off for -6 yards. Rachaad White last year was really great because of his passing game involvement, and it just hasn't been going as well as last year. And then Bucky Irving was involved once again. So it is a bit of a committee there. Bucky Irving was 9 for 44. 2 targets, caught them both for 12 yards. So they're both okay plays each week, but Rachaad White is no longer in that running back 1 territory at all. As long as Bucky Irving is going to have a role there, they're going to keep cannibalizing each other a little bit. And until someone takes a real stranglehold of this backfield or one of them gets injured, it's going to be tough to know who to start, and the upside of each of them is limited because they're both going to be involved. Mike Evans had the big game here for the skill position players. He saw 7 targets, caught 5 for 62 and 2 touchdowns. You can't go away from this guy. I can't. When did I talk about Mike Evans? Was that last week's start of the week? So yeah, I made him a start of the week last week, and what I was preaching was Mike Evans. He has these periods where he doesn't, do great. But you have to keep starting him because he's going to have big blow up games. And there were some reasons, like Okay, he had a bad game against Detroit, and then Denver, he was matched up against Patrick Surtain, and Chris Godwin was getting a ton of production. I made him a start of the week in week 4 against the Eagles. 14 targets, 8 for 94 and a touchdown. He should be in your lineup each and every week at this point. And then again, this week, he had another great performance. He was 5 for 62 and 2 touchdowns, 7 targets. He should be in your lineup. Like, even if he has a bad week every now and then, he's so good. 100 career touchdowns. Great player. And then Chris Godwin, this is what we want. Like, I was really into Chris Godwin in the offseason. I didn't end up drafting him in redraft anywhere, but I have him in Dynasty, and I turned down some decent offers because I thought he was very undervalued at the time. And this is what we like to see. So Chris Godwin, in a down game, he had been amazing for fantasy, but in a down game, to see 6 targets and go 5 for 64, that is exactly what we need from a guy like Chris Godwin, who at his worst is going to be a steady PPR slot receiver, keep you afloat, not lose your week, but he has that upside where he's actually been getting in the end zone. This offense is clicking. So that is awesome to see. Like, I'm actually stoked to see that even in the game where Mike Evans went off, he was able to put up 5 for 64. Every wide receiver is not going to go off every single week. So for Godwin, I think that's actually a good sign combined with what we've seen so far this season, him being great. And then at tight end, K-Dot, another good week. I believe this is his 3rd relevant week in a row. It wasn't super great. 4 targets, 3 for 44, but hey man, tight end is disgusting, so we'll take it. And then Sterling Shepard, he was involved last week, got activated from the practice squad again, and I put him in a couple DFS lineups, and he only had 1 catch for 4 yards, but it went for a touchdown. So we will take that. And I think those are kind of the main points I wanted to make about that game. And then we are going to close off this episode with a little bit of a Dynasty trade review. So I just quickly want to go over some trades. Mainly the DJ Moore trade I recently made in my Dynasty League. So this is a real life trade. Let me get rid of this filter here. This webcam border. That's for my gaming channel, T Ultra on YouTube. Look me up. So this was a trade that I recently made. And let me zoom in a little bit here. See a little better. I'm sorry for all the pop-up ads. We use Flea Flicker, so it's a little janky. But I recently, this was yesterday, as of this recording, actually, I traded DJ Moore away in Dynasty. So my thinking with this trade is DJ Moore is a fantastic player, one of the more underrated wide receivers in the league, but he's always been hampered by poor quarterback play. He's not a guy who can elevate himself over bad quarterback play. Like, very few receivers can, if any. I mean, look at Tyreek Hill right now. Without Tua, he's struggling, and he's the best receiver in the game, arguably, other than like Justin Jefferson. Skull. But I'm not saying Caleb Williams is a bad quarterback. Obviously, it hasn't really worked out yet, but we're only 4 games into his career. We're not going to overreact. He's still a great prospect. He's flashed, and he still very well could be a great player. But in general, rookie quarterbacks do not produce really good fantasy production for number 1 targets on their team. A lot of it just comes down to they don't usually throw a lot of touchdowns compared to their veteran counterparts. And that's just with one alpha on the wide receiver. With the Chicago Bears, you have Keenan Allen on the team, who they brought in free agency. Or was that a trade? I can't remember. Either way, he's on the team. And then they also drafted Rome Odunze very early in the first round. This is a crowded receiving room. They even have Cole Kmet at tight end who's involved. And when you just combine the fact that it's a rookie quarterback, crowded wide receiver room, I went all in this year to win now. I don't have time to wait for DJ Moore and Caleb Williams to mesh. I don't have time to wait for Caleb Williams to turn into an elite quarterback. I don't have time to wait for Keenan Allen to leave next year, because I believe this is his only year under contract with the Bears, And even when DJ Moore, even next year, Rome Odunze is still going to be there. It's just a thing of, I kind of like DJ Moore a little bit long term as Caleb Williams gets better and improves. once Keenan Allen is gone. But this year, I think it's going to be a bit of a down year. And even some of the production he's had, like, which game was it? It was one of these games. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Houston. He had like a Hail Mary. It was either Houston or Indy. He had a Hail Mary right before halftime that gave him like 40 or 50 yards of his production. And then last week, almost double-digit points, but 3 for 22. He got in the end zone, but I just don't think the consistency is going to be there. And when all those receivers are healthy with the rookie quarterback, I don't know if the upside is there either. So this team is rebuilding, long story short. I traded away DJ Moore, Jaylen Warren, who I acquired this offseason, who I still like. I don't dislike Jaylen Warren. I think once he's healthy, he'll be a decent depth piece at running back. Nothing super special. And I also gave a 2027 fourth round rookie pick. I don't have any picks before 2027. So, yep, I'm very all in right now. And in exchange, I got James Cook, running back of the Buffalo Bills. And I also got Adam Thielen, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers. I'm not advocating trading for Adam Thielen, but this team is rebuilding, so it was basically a throw-in where it didn't really, he was going to give it to me no matter what. He has no need for Adam Thielen. And if anything, maybe he's a spot starter late in the year if I have injuries and through bye weeks and stuff, and if Andy Dalton keeps starting, hopefully. But yeah, James Cook is 25, and then DJ Moore, I believe, is 27 and a half-ish, something like that. So James Cook is younger, but just given the shelf life of running backs versus wide receivers, I mean, I could see DJ Moore playing, and being relevant into his early 30s, like 31, maybe 32. So he's got 3, 4, maybe 5 years, if you're lucky, of production left. James Cook is 25. I mean, how many 28, 29-year-old running backs are super productive? We see it at times. We do see it. So hopefully that happens for me. But, if I can get like 3 more really productive years out of James Cook, or if I can get that 4th or even 5th year, I'll be really happy. But DJ Moore, to me, is the guy who has the better long-term shelf life, even though he is a couple years older than James Cook. And, I also included Jaylen Warren and the late rookie pick, where it was probably worth this rebuilding team to give up James Cook. And I really needed production now. So we can take a look at the other trades that I made in the offseason too. So, earlier in the year, I traded with the same team. I needed another quarterback behind Jalen Hurts because Trevor Lawrence was my only backup and he was playing terribly. So I gave up Miles Sanders, Frank Gore Jr., and a 2027 third. I got back Matthew Stafford and a 2027 fourth. Pretty irrelevant. Nothing too crazy there. This was a bad trade. I don't know why I did this. I gave up Colby Parkinson, a 2027 fourth, and Bub Means to a rebuilding team for Zeke. I made lower offers for Zeke, and he just wasn't biting. He really wanted Colby Parkinson in a pick. So I was like, all right, I think Zeke could be the starter for the Cowboys, and it didn't work out. But it was worth the shot. I didn't really lose much there. And then this was the big trade I made in the offseason. Let's start in the beginning. So I acquired Alvin Kamara and Tyreek Hill, as well as Roschon Johnson, who might be relevant. So I got those guys, Kamara and Tyreek Hill. Kamara was my running back, my guy for redraft. So he was my favorite running back value in drafts and redraft. I loved Alvin Kamara. And in Dynasty, for a rebuilding team that was selling their kind of older assets, it was a no-brainer to target Kamara and Tyreek Hill, who's getting a little older, but as long as 2 is healthy over the next few years, should be very, very good for fantasy. I did have to give up quite a bit, though. I gave up Jalen Waddle, Tyreek's teammate, who is younger, but also very good. I gave up a 2026 first, a 2025 fourth, and I also gave up Trey Tucker, who, especially with Devontae Adams, with the trade rumors and him not playing, has been relevant for fantasy. Like, I didn't want to give up these guys, but I'm in win now mode, and these guys are going to help me more today than these guys will, even if they're better tomorrow. And there's some juggernaut teams in my league, so I really had to go all in. And I will show you the team overall. I just kind of want to go over the philosophy as well. I don't typically advise teams to trade for running backs in Dynasty. Usually you want to build around young core wide receivers and then use your rookie picks to get those running backs, because running back production early in the draft is a little easier to predict. But I was doing that. I got second place a couple times. I made some runs, and I just never quite got the championship. So I really was going all in this year and hopefully next year. I traded a 2026 second round pick as well as Andre Oshivas for Derrick Henry. Oshivas has flashed some ability, especially with T. Higgins missing some games. Higgins is likely going to be gone. Oshivas could very well be a good player long term. And obviously a second round pick is a second round pick. But Derrick Henry, he's been a stud running back this year. I took a gamble that he wasn't aged out, and at least so far it's been working. And then this was the big trade I made. I almost felt guilty accepting it, but this is where, I got Jalen Hurts. I got Drake London, who you might think, oh, you're a win now team. Why are you trading for Drake London? Well, the value is just so insane where I don't really care about the age. The production I'm getting out of Drake London was worth it. And him being super young was just the cherry on top. But, he is, I couldn't believe the value I got in this trade. So I got Jalen Hurts, Jalen Warren, and Drake London. I had to trade away Alvin Kamara, who I love, but in a dynasty league, I traded away Alvin Kamara, Tua, a third, and a fourth for this package. It was a no-brainer, even in a one quarterback league, even as a rebuilding team. Kamara might arguably be the best player of this whole package this year, but I just couldn't turn this down. So I made this trade for James Cook. This is the team as it stands today. Jalen Hurts is my starting quarterback, but Lawrence is in there. Just between him and Dalton. We got Derrick Henry. I do have Jonathan Taylor. He is injured, but I do have his backup, Trey Sermon. I do have Christian McCaffrey as well on IR. I dropped Jordan Mason thinking he was the third or fourth string running back, and then McCaffrey gets hurt. Mitchell gets hurt. I shouldn't have dropped him. Can't trade for him. He wanted Drake London and a first for Jordan Mason, and that was too much. Just traded for James Cook. And then at wide receiver, we still have Tyreek Hill, Drake London, Chris Godwin, Juwan Jennings, Kyle Pitts, and Dallas Goedert. And then some depth pieces. We have Mike Williams, Hopkins, Sutton, Michael Wilson, Zeke, for what it's worth, Roshan. So, and we got the Chargers, Cardinals, and Bears defense. So that's going to do it for the episode, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate it. Please make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. I will see you guys in the next one. Good luck in week 5. Peace out.